Ladies and gentlemen, the biggest fight on this earth right now is over Africa, the continent with all of the resources. Despite what people may tell you about Africa, Africa is the most valuable landmass on the face of the earth. He who rules Africa rules the world. You rule the resources, you rule the world, plain and simple. And we know how China has been in there making headways for many years now. And of course, the US and other countries are watching this. And it's amazing how everybody is going in there with their military. The US got military there, China got military there, Russia got military there, France got military, Germany, everybody got military there. But you know what? They're all outside forces that really don't belong there at all. These folks have not been good for Africa at all. None of them. They haven't done well by those folks at all. The history is horrendous. Really shouldn't be there at all, touching the resources. For people that got a lot of mouth and claim they're so powerful, they sure can't live without that dark continent, can they? So this came out December 14th, 2018. The Trump administration's Africa policy is all about countering China's influence. They're afraid. They see how China is making gains all across Africa. And now they are standing up and noticing, if they would have done right by those people from day one, been in there for centuries, you wouldn't have no issue, but you in there being all selfish and self-centered. Now you're worried. It took you to come to 2018 to get to being worried about where you stand in Africa. See, many of the African nations, they don't want to deal with these Western nations anymore. But you see, I don't believe China should be there. I don't believe Russia should be there. I don't care what kind of relationship they have today. It still does not clear up anything that has been done over the centuries. Donald Trump's administration has unveiled a new Africa strategy, a three-pronged plan focused on furthering U.S. interests and countering the great power competitors of China and Russia. In a speech at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, December 14th, National Security Advisor John Bolton said the U.S. will advance fair trade and commercial ties with African nations, help fight terrorism and military violence. That's not what Africa needs. Come on, y'all. Let's be real. That's not what Africa needs. Those militaries are over there for the interests of the countries, the invading country. Those militaries are not over there for Africa. It is to protect their resources and interests they have in those African countries. It's not for the African people. Don't ever fall for U.S. military or anybody else's military in Africa is for the good and help of the African nation. They're full of shit. This is for their own interests. When do these people ever do anything for others out of the kindness of their heart? We have yet to see it. On the last point, the administration said it intends to ensure the U.S. taxpayer dollars aren't used to bolster corrupt leaders. That means leaders that won't cooperate with the West. That's your corrupt leader. Anybody that won't go along with the West, that is labeled as a corrupt leader. Or violators of human rights, and will seek and reconfigure or in support for unproductive, unsuccessful, and unaccounted for peacekeeping operations currently in place in the continent. Americans are a generous people. I can't, y'all. I got to skip over that. Okay. The crux of the speech, however, singled out Beijing and Moscow because that's who they got focus on. They are the ones putting military in and putting infrastructure in. Well, mainly China. China is definitely one building up the infrastructure over in Africa, really for themselves, um, expanding financial and political influence in Africa. And see, the reason why there's eyes on China, China's going over there with all their racism and everything, but the reason why there's so many eyes on China from these other nations is because they have built up so much of the infrastructure, putting roads in, bridges, airports, um, all down at the ports. They have built up the ports around Africa. And see, America has been in there for centuries and they have not lifted a finger other than to rape out resources. But they have never done anything as far as building up the infrastructure over in Africa. But see, now that they see what all of, China has done, now they're coming up with all these initiatives to do things in Africa. Well, why did you wait so long? Why did China have to do something first before the US finally got off their ass? Unbelievable. I'm going to say it again. Neither one of you belong in there. Bolton said the two nations were deepening their reach and investments. He's talking about China and Russia in the region in hopes of gaining a competitive advantage over the US. He especially criticized China's Belt and Road Initiative, a multi-billion-dollar program that involves infrastructure development and investments in countries across Asia, Europe, and Africa. China uses bribes, opaque agreements, and the strategy use of debt to hold states in Africa captive to Beijing's wishes and demands, Bolton says. Okay, but what have the US done? You know, you claim you're doing so much and you still got all them starving kids over there. Oh, okay, but you've done so much. No, you've done so much for yourselves. Okay, you need to say it the right way. Bolton borrowed his choice of words from former US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Remember, they were sending him over there to run his mouth to all of the African leaders about not doing business with China, but at the same time, not doing anything for all these nations he was running to. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Who criticized China's model of economic development in Africa ahead of a visit to the continent earlier this year, which did no good whatsoever. So China's foreign direct investment in Africa has grown steadily. So you can see, and I believe these are the years 2004 all the way up to 2016. Okay, Sino-African relationships have grown substantially over the last 2 decades, with China providing billions of dollars in loans, grants, and development financing to a number of the continent's 55 nations. The country has financed large-scale infrastructure projects such as railways in countries like Kenya, factories, and Lesotho, um, Namibia, and free trade zones. It also helped Ethiopia launch its first satellite. China is also exercising major moves as a global military power on the continent. I don't see where China and any of these nations need a military there except for to protect the resources that they're stealing. Opening up a key military base and Djibouti, um, and deploying peacekeepers in South Sudan, Mali, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Plus, there's the training and education opportunity it provides thousands of African leaders and bureaucrats, students, and business people. Yeah, well, stop taking Western education. Um, Russia has also followed this approach in recent years, signing agreements to establish economic zones and Eritrea, exploring opportunities in accessing minerals across southern Africa, and enhancing military and technical cooperation with nations like the Central African Republic. And as you can see, Africa has pledged 60 billion to Africa in 2018, which is nothing when you look at it in terms of the resources that they're taking. They're probably raping out trillions and trillions of dollars of resources just for $60 billion. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. You know, the continent cannot grow with all of these outside entities in there all the time. And this is why they haven't grown. These nations that are in there raping at the US, Russia, China, France, Germany, all of them, they have done nothing but held Africa back for all of these centuries. They have not helped this country grow. I mean, the continent grow one iota other than stealing the resources for themselves, all for selfish reasons. That's why they're all there, a bunch of greedy asses that just can't get enough of the resources there. You know, it's amazing how these countries were all put on land masses that had limited resources. But Africa is a continent that was given all of the resources. That should say a lot about who's chosen on this planet and who's not, who's only in power because they had a gun and who didn't have one. I mean, seriously, how hard is it to go invade a land mass with people on it that have no guns and you got a gun? How hard is it to do that? It's not hard to do that at all. That's easy shit. US officials have grown increasingly worried about what these expansions could mean for their long-term interests in the continent. So in other words, the US is afraid they're losing their grip on Africa. That's what this is all about. That's why you need a plan, because they are losing their grip on Africa to these other nations, which they need to all get their asses the hell out of there. So they're afraid of all of the gains, especially China has in Africa. And it didn't help when Trump sat around calling this place with all the resources a shithole. It's a shithole, but look at you now, groveling to get in there because you're afraid others are taking over, talking all that shit, and look at you now. Okay, so Bolton's speech was criticized for its lack of commitment to advancing human rights and democracy in the continent because they don't care about those things. The US they don't care about human rights in Africa or democracy. The only thing they care about is getting military forces in there and military bases to protect the raping of the resources that America take out of there. That's their only interest in Africa. He's never going to get up talking about human rights and democracy and what they're going to do. They're not going to do a damn thing. They haven't done a damn thing for centuries, and they're not going to do anything now. Just understand that. It don't take centuries for you to do something for the people that's beneficial. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's how I feel. Nobody benefits in Africa, but these outside invaders, they're the only ones benefiting at the end of the day when it comes down to the continent of Africa. But please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.